All right, welcome to the next episode of Non-Consensus Investing. I'm thrilled to have Nic Carter here. Nic, I don't think really needs an introduction. You know, Nic, I learned earlier, was a philosophy major. So was I. We were talking about Nietzsche and all the ulcers he had, which probably led to his kind of dark philosophy. But, you know, Nic, he's a non-consensus investor, right? He's invested in digital assets early. He's invested in AI. He's invested in CoreWeave. We're going to talk to him about that journey as well. He's also done this, what I call like a personal transformation. If you look at like Bezos 1.0 from the late 90s, where he's looking at a computer, and there's a Bezos 2.0 who just went like full bald, put the sunglasses on, got checked up. And, you know, Nic has done an incredible transformation as well. And so we're going to talk about all of that. And of course, if you want to post any of your questions here, we'll do our best, you know, in the flow of the conversation to get into it. I want to start off with this clip that Nic made leading up to a digital asset conference. I call it like the Intimidation video.
Oh no.
We gotta play this. So let's take a look at this thing. All right. This is called
I feel like you're ambushing me with this right now.
This is a work of art. This is high entertainment, okay? So I'm going to share my screen. Let's get the audio going.
You all know I've gone to bat for Bitcoin time and again. Ever since the start, you've known me as an analyst, a writer, a thinker, a pundit, a person.
This is a show about investing. This is an investing show.
You all know I've gone to bat for Bitcoin time and
again. Also the personality behind
now
the
we're taking the battle to a new arena. On May 30 in Austin, Texas, I'm introducing you to the new Nic. Nic the fighter.
Nic.
So loud.
You should feel proud, man. You probably dropped some good cash on that video. I don't know if you got a guy in Fiverr, but
it was free. It was free.
You got that for free.
My friend Kayla made it for free.
Oh wow, that's a great.
She's very good. She's a great videographer. I just did what she said.
That was, you know, I was definitely looking forward to that match going into consensus. Significant intimidation video, one of I think several. And your opponent, you know, unfortunately had an injury and had to bow out. David Hoffman, also a good guy. But why don't we start there? Like, I think investing and how you conduct and live your life actually go hand in hand. You need discipline, you need resilience. So how do you think about the role of boxing investing and, you know, how you approach, you know, your daily routines?
Yeah. I mean, that fight didn't happen. You know, Hoffman, he pulled out 24 hours after the video dropped, but I don't think it's because the video.
I would have dropped that by video.
No, I'm sympathetic to David. He had a broken rib, so you can't fight with that. But I am fighting in Nashville, Karate Combat 48, on the 25th of this month. So that's the biggest arena Karate Combat's ever, you know, obtained. So I think I'll win. So come and watch me then.
You have to approach the mindset with winning, right? You got to. It starts in the mind, psychology, yeah?
Yeah, so why did I decide to, you know, get into combat sports this year? Good question. I have always been kind of focused on fitness, more so in the last kind of 2-3 years. And I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And I thought combat sports was probably the hardest discipline that I could do.
Oh.
And obviously very physically challenging and mentally challenging too. And as it just so happens, for some reason in crypto, there is this subplot of fighting each other, which is kind of interesting. And a couple of my friends had done it, like Luke Martin and Loomdart have both done these boxing matches under the promotion Crypto Fight Night. And I was just a huge combat sports fan, Karate Combat. I was familiar with them. And, you know, I saw a BitBoy fight Moralite on Karate Combat, and that kind of inspired me. And I thought, why don't I do this? You know, if I can find a suitable opponent and, you know, have a couple months to train up and prove to myself first and foremost that I can do this, and then prove to the crypto Twitter that I'm tough. Basically, that was the objective, and I haven't done it yet. I mean, I haven't fought, but I will, and hopefully, I put on a good show and demonstrate the skills that I learned in the last few months.
So the first audience is yourself and proving to yourself. That's interesting. And then there's a secondary of, I guess having some fun with crypto Twitter. Although I think
my objective is to entertain people. I mean, obviously, I like to think of myself as a serious professional and all that stuff. And I have LPs and, I'm a partner at a fund, and that's all very serious. But at the same time, I'm part of this game called crypto Twitter where you're trying to entertain people and your character in the play. And a lot of what I do is like, silly antics to entertain people, whether it's promoting tungsten cubes or hating on seed oils or creating memes. And a fight highlight is like the ultimate meme. I mean, look at Ansem after he lost his fight. He didn't train. That almost played into his reputation in some ways. BitBoy, people, that almost healed his reputation after he won his fight. People saw that he had this grit to him. They were impressed by it. So everybody's always trying to be the main character, right?
Really?
So
I mean, that's usually the tragic curse if you're the main character. You want to be in the kingdom of the court.
It's a poison chalice. You don't want to be the number one main character. You want to be like 3 to 5 in the ranking. Right. But everybody still aspires to it, even if once you get to the top of the mountain, it's the sort of Damocles and, it cuts your throat. Once you get there, you still want to do it. So everybody wants to be the main character. Right. And I thought this would, if I won and got a cool highlight, this would go some way towards doing that.
Right. So what's your daily training routine look like?
Well, I don't want to leak too much alpha to my opponent, but it's intense. I do a mixture of so my primary discipline is boxing, even though the fight that I'm taking is karate, so that's more like kickboxing with some grappling. So primarily I train boxing, and it typically a day starts at 7 or 8 a.m. with strength and conditioning. So basically lifting weights with a focus on muscular endurance, not hypertrophy. And then a section which is kind of technical boxing with my coach, or hitting the bag, focus on endurance, mimicking fight conditions. And then I have to take calls, of course, for a few hours.
Right.
And then around noon or midday, I'll go to the track and do sprints, because being in shape for boxing or any kind of similar sport like that, there's like being in shape and then there's fight shape, and it's just levels above. And if you've ever tried to spar for a 3-minute round, it's so just fatiguing. It's so hard.
It's exhausting.
Your heart rate,
just a couple of minutes, right?
Yeah, when you're sparring, your heart rate's typically between 170 and 190. You have to be able to sustain that for 2 minutes, recover for a minute, sustain it again for 2 minutes, depending on how many rounds you're fighting. And sprints are the best way, I think, to prepare for that on the cardio side. And so that's the hardest session of the day. And I have to like say a little prayer before I go and do that, and like read my affirmations, because I get so intimidated by the idea of doing 8 400-meter sprints back to back or something like that. And then the last session of the day will be typically 7 and 9 p.m., something like that, after work. And it's sparring most days at the gym with the other guys in the gym. And that's also hard, but it's more fun. So you kind of forget about how painful it is.
Right. Well, I mean, it sounds like the training's painful too. And how do you hold yourself accountable to your training regime?
Well, I have actually a number of coaches, but my primary coach will yell at me if I don't show up. So in my first camp, I don't think I missed a day. I don't think I missed a workout. I didn't miss a day. And so typically it's 6 days a week and 3 to 4 sessions a day. And then I get a rest day. In my second camp, obviously I have to travel occasionally. So, but yeah, I just commit to it. And, I think about the fight and the fact that my opponent's training is hard, or maybe not quite as hard, but still training, and they're a dangerous opponent. And I think about the fact that you're performing on a card in front of thousands of people, potentially tens of thousands in person, and then hundreds of thousands on the stream. And everybody that you know professionally, everyone on crypto Twitter will be watching it maybe after the fact, or they'll see a highlight. So, that's very motivating. You don't want to show up and look fat
That's
or
fascinating.
look slow. You don't want to look bad.
Right.
And so it doesn't take that much to show up every day and do it. I also take a lot of pre-workout. So
Interesting. So I guess a couple of things are. One is you have a coach that helps hold you accountable. I think there's a lot to be said for that. Having someone else that you can share your goals with that can call you out, I think is very powerful. I agree. I do CrossFit, and you also don't want to let other people down that expect to see you there in the morning at the same time. There's a camaraderie that's a part of it. And the other part you mentioned is, the fear of failure, and you channel that into motivation. Some people would just not even attempt it, right? Public speaking is considered one of the most mortifying tasks anyone can do, let alone fighting someone else in public for the first time in a live stream to 10,000 people, or more. So how did you, taking a step back, and then we'll transition to investing and CoreWeave and AI. Nic's written a lot about all these topics, and there's a lot to unpack there. But how did you go from, philosophy student to, fighter, investor, AI, digital assets? What did that journey look like?
yeah, I mean, I think philosophy actually is a good base for investing. It's a good base for a lot of things, actually. But I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I did philosophy because I enjoyed it. And it teaches you to be inquisitive and to think, very critically, and think very deliberately. And that's kind of what the role of an investor is: to be curious and to investigate things, and to get totally absorbed by niche topics. So I worked as a journalist for 2 years after college, actually,
Hmm.
and which I also think is a good base.
What,
I
what
think it's
kind of
very similar.
coverage? What beat were you on? Or yeah,
It was the dullest beat in the world, which is corporate law. So it
LexisNexis kind of. That sounds pretty dry.
it was extremely dry. And so I quit that because I was obsessed with Bitcoin. This is 2016, and I thought to myself, well, all I want to do is work in Bitcoin. And there wasn't like a big Bitcoin industry at the time. And so I stalled. I went to business school for a year, and during that time started writing and publishing my thoughts on Bitcoin. That was really it. That was the only game in town at the time. And through a series of lucky coincidences and some mentors that happened to believe in me, I ended up at Fidelity on their crypto team. They were starting out this proprietary fund under, basically, Fidelity has their family office, kind of a captive fund there, focusing on investing in digital assets more as a learning opportunity than anything, to understand how to operationalize a fund like that, to how to build the back end infrastructure, the back office, and also because the leadership wanted exposure. And so actually Chris Berniski was someone I met. I met him at ARK Invest when I was still in school, and Kathy and Chris invited me in to one of their sessions. So I took the bus up to New York and went and met them and talked about crypto. And then I wrote my my dissertation on the governance of digital assets in 2016, 2017, which was a very revealing experience. Actually made me very bearish on most tokens. And I thought that the governance, even if there was some claimed model of governance, was very poor. But it also made me very excited about the kind of leaderless, decentralized governance that projects like Bitcoin have. And then I posted that on Twitter, and people found it and started talking about it. And I posted a lot of Medium blogs, and I'd also started this project called Coin Metrics when I was in business school, which is a data project, just aggregating crypto data and publishing it for free for anyone to use. And I started seeing the data in like sell side reports on the street, which was kind of funny to me because it was like one student's data project. And I started seeing it in like Goldman Sachs sell side reports and stuff like that, which was very validating. And through all that, I ended up at Fidelity at this fund, which the fund today is called Avon. So I was at the predecessor version of that. And after about a year of doing that, my then boss, Matt Walsh, suggested that we strike out and start our own firm. And again, we were pretty green, at least I was. And so we were lucky enough that, a few folks who were willing to take a bet on us and back a first time fund focusing on the venture side in the crypto space. And that was Castle Island Fund 1, which we raised in 2018. And now we're deploying Fund 3. So it's gone well. Right. It's been a great kind of 6 or 7 years there.
Right. And Coinmetrics, a venture-backed company. I think Goldman's an investor there. I won't hold that against you here. But yeah, and Castle Island's got a great podcast and a number of venture funds. Definitely worth a listen to. And it's interesting because I think you and Matt straddle this TradFi world and crypto world. You see both sides of it, right? Fidelity, of course, is one of the leading investment institutions, a highly trusted brand, also highly centralized player, but also at the vanguard of innovation. So I think you've got an interesting seat there. You also, when you were kind of identified with Bitcoin, you also had I guess I don't know what you want to call it, like a rupture with the community. Do you want to walk through that and how you dealt with that? And what did that mean to be like a public figure where everything you say is scrutinized and you've got trolls coming at you left and right? And how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, it's like the quintessential problem of the modern world is becoming captive to a certain community. And the way that social media is set up, it really encourages this, which is once you develop a certain brand, then you are encouraged to only produce content which affirms the views of the community that has developed around you. And for me, that was Bitcoin, and specifically being a Bitcoin maximalist. And I never thought of myself that way. I mean, I was interested in all sorts of projects. I was interested in Ethereum when it came out, all number of things. I think blockchains are more than just for store of value. I think there's all kinds of interesting things you can do with them. But on sort of the Twitter side, people thought of me as exclusively Bitcoin person. And I realized that I was risking becoming flanderized, basically becoming a parody of myself by just creating content that appealed to this specific community. And it is weird, like you're trying to please the algorithm god, like you're trying to create offerings to appease the specific algorithm. And it is dehumanizing because you lose your own personhood, and all you're trying to do is create content that specifically does well and performs well with your community.
The dopamine machine is there. Is that
so? It's so it's it's called an audience capture, and I saw that happening to myself. And the hard break with the Bitcoin community wasn't deliberate, actually, although I had been trying to figure out how to fire my fans, so to speak. You have to be willing to do that if you want to be flexible. And as a venture capitalist, you invest in all sorts of things, and you want to have the flexibility to pursue your interests and invest broadly. So it doesn't make sense to become audience captured. I think it's a very bad idea. And so I was criticized in 2021, I think summer 21, by parts of the Bitcoin community that I think saw an opportunity to sort of gain clout by tearing down a figure in the community. It's kind of seen as like a zero-sum game. Like there's only so much impressions to go around, and if someone else has a lot of impressions, that means you've less. And we were criticized, or I was, for an investment we made in a relatively anodyne and ordinary startup called Dynamic, which was a Web3 infrastructure wallet provider company. Not a very offensive investment at all, in my opinion. There wasn't even a token involved or anything like that. And I saw that as an opportunity to make it very clear I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm a Bitcoin moderate. I love Bitcoin, and I've dedicated most of my professional career now to Bitcoin specifically. And both professionally, putting my capital behind it, but also writing, speaking, everything. but I have other interests, and so if you don't like that, then you don't have to follow me. So
Mhm.
that's what I did, and I'm very glad I did that because I think it opened up a lot of new opportunities for people who realized that I contained a lot more breadth than they might have thought. And from an investment perspective, one of the biggest questions we would get from both LPs and prospective founders that we were looking to invest in was, well, aren't you guys just a Bitcoin fund? And so we're not. And I saw the opportunity to make that super, super clear. And, there's a portion of the Bitcoin community that will always dislike me for that reason, but I'm totally okay with it because
Mhm.
my job is not to appease the Bitcoin community. It's to invest, widely in the places I want to, as well as invest in Bitcoin startups, Bitcoin L2s, which we're still able to do. And I think it's very interesting that the Bitcoin L2 theme is happening now. We're still very actively doing that, but we don't just do Bitcoin.
Mhm. Right. And then you made an investment in this company called, well, I don't know if it was called CoreWeave back then, but this is a $16 billion private company. It was worth $7 billion in November. They're building 26 data centers around the world. Walk us through how you were introduced to that and that journey.
Yeah, this is such an interesting story because it's like these little coincidences and things you just never expect to happen, but it's like,
Serendipity.
I mean, really, I think things happen for a reason. I think it was part of the plan. So I'd always been interested in proof of work, and I think proof of work is very elegant. I continue to think it has great qualities that aren't recaptured by proof of stake. And so I'd always written a lot about proof of work. And specifically, when the debates were happening, Vitalik had a big long series about proof of stake over proof of work. I kind of took the other side of that and I thought, well, as interesting as Ethereum is, I think it's actually a mistake to deprecate proof of work on Ethereum. This was kind of in 2018, 2019 era. And I inserted myself in those debates, was strongly on the side of proof of work. And through that, I got connected to a couple entrepreneurs that had an Ethereum mining operation at the time called Atlantic Crypto, actually. And specifically Brian Venturo and Brandon McBee. And their business was mining Ethereum. And they were also, unsurprisingly, on the side of Ethereum keeping proof of work going and being skeptical about proof of stake. So that's how I met them, was just things I'd written about the benefits of proof of work over proof of stake. And we found a lot of intellectual commonalities. And then they told me they were thinking about kind of pivoting the company a bit and opening up their GPU farm to other types of compute. At the time, it wasn't AI, actually. It was more rendering focused. So like Blender and I don't know the rendering world very well, but other types of compute beyond just Ethereum. And of course, I think they saw the need to diversify their client base too.
Because their business was going to go away overnight as soon as proof of work transitioned to staking, and they couldn't mine Ethereum and sell it. So
Yeah,
they had to pivot.
So I wrote them a check into, I think, the seed round, or is basically the first round back in 2018, open to external investors. On the strength of that narrative, we actually looked at it at Castle Island. And
So the thesis that you bet on was this kind of rendering distributed compute thesis that you bet on. So you weren't investing in the Ethereum miner for the mining capability. You're betting on the pivot.
like them, I realized that Ethereum would eventually make the transition, and I was bearish on their ability to make the transition in a timely manner. So the bet was they would be able to find other demand for their big GPU fleet, high-end GPUs too, but that Ethereum would tide them over until then.
Got
And
it.
had the Ethereum merge happen on time, CoreWeave would not be in business, in my opinion. It was only they made the specific bet to have high-end GPUs, not AMDs, which was what all the other Ethereum miners were doing.
So they had NVIDIA GPUs.
Yeah, and specifically the ones with like more capacity. This was before the A100 or anything like that. And so they were betting on like the premium GPU segment with the understanding that Ethereum mining would go away and you would need higher quality and more capacious GPUs for these other use cases. And they were also betting that the merge would take a long time. And both of those bets were true.
Oh, wow.
Even so, it was a little tricky for a moment there. I thought they were definitely going out of business, actually, but they were able to effectuate this transition. And as it just so happened, after the merge and after Ethereum compute went away, AI kicked off and went parabolic. It was amazing
Within
timing.
3 months, essentially, of the merge, right? GPT's
Yeah.
moment was like end of that year.
Yeah, like 2019, 2020. I mean, this stuff started
Maybe,
happening before ChatGPT. I mean, you had
fair enough.
GPT-2, you had early use cases on
Got it.
GPT-2 that they would periodically tell me, "Hey, this like one company, this one use case is hammering our servers." One of the first ones they told me about was AI Dungeon, which was this role-playing game, a text-based role-playing game which we utilized GPT-2. So this is even
Right.
before ChatGPT.
Huh.
And I played the game. I'm like, wow, you can actually make the game return arbitrary queries. You can ask the game to solve math problems and it'll do it. Like, this is amazing. And this is a very primitive model based on today's standards. But I was completely blown away with I'm like, oh my God, something amazing is happening here. And so they happened to make that transition right when this hockey sticked. And of course, the rest is history. I consider them one of the fastest growing and maybe most important companies in the world. They're, very tightly linked with Nvidia, which is the most important company in the world.
NVIDIA's an investor in the
And
business too.
yeah, and that close relationship with Nvidia has been one of the things that's powered CoreWeave's growth. And now, of course, they're on an amazing trajectory. But yeah, it like you sometimes forget that these things have very humble beginnings, and there's so many moments along the way that are so path dependent. Where if something had happened 3 months earlier or later, they might have been out of business completely.
Wow. Amazing. There's this quote that the victors write history, and there's a related quote about startups where, in hindsight, everything's a beautiful story that goes up and to the right. But the reality, there's hand-to-hand combat, there's pivot, there are close moments here and there. And, you're betting on the grit and the resilience of the founder to find some opportunity and make it come together. And there's some signposts on the way, but not always.
Yeah,
So,
watching these guys execute has been incredible, and it's the same founding team that's been together the whole way as they've done this transition from Ethereum compute to rendering other forms of HPC compute to now being one of the biggest AI clouds in the world. And what's interesting is these guys had commodities back. They're commodities traders,
right.
and that's what I see this business as being. Is like GPUs are the commodity, and they went max long GPUs at the time when AI became this the biggest theme in capital markets, and they were able to establish themselves as having a fleet of this enormous.
Right.
So it's an amazing commodities trade, one of the best of all time.
Right. And we should double click on compute as a currency. This is a thesis that I think is gaining traction out there. We'll double back. But CoreWeave, to your point, is now powering Microsoft, just powering OpenAI. So when people say Microsoft powers OpenAI, well, it's actually powered by CoreWeave, right? And this is a business that's going to probably do public markets exit Q1 of next year. So you've obviously had an incredible win on that. I got in at the 7 billion valuation. You got in seed round. It's at 16 now. We feel pretty good about it. It was up 3x ish in 6 months.
Like 7 billion to, I think the last disclosed round was like 18, 19 billion, like in 6 months time.
Right.
6
billion
months.
here, billion
It's
there.
6 months.
Extraordinary. And meanwhile, OpenAI, okay, what are they doing? They're still at 86 billion. What's going on there? What about Mistral? What about Anthropic? And so, yeah, great picks and shovels play too, right? Infrastructure layer. And to your point, I think one of the things about their execution ability is that they can generate compute highly efficiently. And do you want to elaborate on why that's the case and what does it mean to manufacture compute efficiently, et cetera?
Yeah, and it's not a fungible good. I mean, it's fungible in some senses, but not in others. It's not just a matter of plonking down a bunch of GPUs in a data center and then turning it on and hitting go. What CoreWeave has a lot of proprietary technology, which has to do with orchestration, networking, sequencing. So like stuff like the networking for GPUs is this enormous challenge in of itself, because you're trying to get 16,000 high-end GPUs to communicate in real time within a data center. You're training a model. If one of the GPUs goes offline, you lose one of the connections, the entire model training could be compromised. So managing a fleet at this scale is an enormous logistical challenge. And then as you have different jobs coming in, trying to figure out how to sequence them and prioritize them, so, and then of course you have to go out and get the clients, like that's something that has to be done as well, right? There's a go-to-market and sales job in there as well. You have to identify clients that are going to be sustained long-term buyers of the compute, and figure out how to maximally extract value from the fleet of GPUs you have with no downtime, and manage the transition from model training to inference, which is the way we're going now. And then, of course, you're dealing with supply chain bottlenecks everywhere, both on the power side. You're trying to build data centers at a very high level of, tier 3, tier 4 data centers, not just like these little shacks that Bitcoins get mined in. And you're trying to get access to GPUs and persuade NVIDIA to give you access when everybody in the world is trying to buy GPUs. Sovereign states are buying them, all of these well-funded venture-backed firms, and the hyperscalers buying GPUs. So there's a number of sort of interlocking tasks that are all extremely difficult, which they've been able to do very well. So I think it's a common myth that just that anyone can buy GPUs and then just turn them on and have a great sort of AI cloud business. I think there's a lot more to it, and they've obviously executed extremely well.
Right. They've done a fantastic job. On compute, you mentioned compute as a commodity, and the CoreWeave team previously, these are commodity traders. Sam Altman has this idea that everyone should be provisioned with some basic level of compute per year. It's like the pivot from universal basic income. Look, I imagine his vision also includes that opening a proviso then it's funded by the government. I don't know, but I can see why he might want to advance that. It's compute as a commodity. And look, Bitcoin is a commodity. It's a currency. And so are other digital assets. And we've got this thing called fiat, right? What do you think about that idea of compute as a kind of currency, or even daily utility? Yeah.
I think part of Bitcoin's appeal does lie in the proof of work origin of a huge part of it, because it shows that real work went into it. It's proof of computational hardness, and the mining aspect of Bitcoin has always entranced people. Even if mining is just for consensus and initial distribution of coins, I think it gave this real fairness to Bitcoin. And whenever you try and explain to Bitcoin to someone in the early days, like the conversations would always settle on mining. So there's something mystical about Bitcoin mining that gave Bitcoin its distinct appeal, which other crypto assets, I think, just don't have. And that is one of the things that makes Bitcoin special. And that's why I spent so much time on proof of work, specifically defending proof of work against its adversaries, which were many. It's hard for me to imagine how you would have a compute-backed currency, though, because it seems very ephemeral. So like Bitcoin is a compute-backed currency, but one backed by GPUs or something like that. I mean, the problem is that you have vintages of GPUs, and then they become less relevant over time, and they're replaced
obsolescence.
Right. And it's actually happening very quickly now. You had the early high-end NVIDIAs, and you had the AMDs were used to mine Ethereum and the gaming rigs, and now then we moved on to the A100 and the H100, and now we have a new vintage coming out now, and so the older hardware is much less relevant, happens very quickly, as our desire for compute and high-end GPUs is pretty insatiable, and we see these things get replaced every 2, 3, 4 years. So if you had a tokenized GPU, I feel like it would become obsolete very quickly. So I don't know if a tokenized H100 or anything would make for a good currency.
Fair enough. Yeah, look, it makes for a good story for sure, and it keeps AI in the debate in the public policy arena. You post this, I thought, thought-provoking article on how AI is going to transform how we live. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, here we go. And you talk about the CoreWeave story in the beginning, and also stable diffusion, which is an algorithm. And do you want to double click on these items? You say AI would dramatically empower capital relative to labor. Like, what are the key ideas you're communicating here?
Yeah, the point of this was when I wrote this, Nvidia was on the cusp of becoming the largest public company in the world, and then they did do that a couple weeks later. And I was reading Nvidia's financials, and they were just so impressive. I mean, it wasn't even a story of multiple expansion; it was a story of the fundamentals of the business improving quarter to quarter at an
That's right.
enormously rapid rate, like the likes of which we've never seen before.
Right.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
a multi-trillion-dollar company, and the year-over-year growth was like in over 100%. So it's
Right.
just absolutely crazy to see, really. And it scared me, actually. So the whole point of this post was that it actually made me very nervous, and it's because I realized that AI, I know it's a very, very general term, but AI, and having used a lot of these tools myself, I mean, I have a good kind of level of informational access, thanks to CoreWeave, and then just my own interest in AI. I felt like it would make a lot of human labor obsolete, and not just blue collar labor like driving trucks or driving taxis, which that's very obvious that it'll do, and not just tasks like translation where AI is already far better than humans, but professional services, white collar forms of labor, like basically the job that doctors do, diagnostics, that's could clearly be done better by a model rather than a fallible human. Legal work, querying through a body of legal literature, compiling briefs or contracts. Like, of course, AI will outperform there. That's very, very clear to me.
Mhm.
Accounting work, like these kinds of professions that are done by serious elite professionals, that are, at the higher end of the income scale. That's where I feel in the next decade, AI is actually really going to penetrate and deliver enormous cost savings to consumers, but also losses to those professions which operate like guilds today. And of course, there'll
Yeah.
be resistance to that. I mean, the medical establishment will hate AI, but at the same time, that resistance will be met with opportunity. So maybe there'll be some country that passes a regulatory regime that allows for some medical decisions to be made by AI, even if the US bans it and says, no, you need human doctors. So if some countries are slower and more resistant, others will race ahead because they're using these better tools. And so I was worried about that, and I continue to worry. I think it makes human capital almost obsolete in a lot of professions. Maybe even in investing too. Maybe even venture capital. Like maybe what I do will be obsolete too. And I was trying to think about asset allocation given this hypothesis. My personal view is I'm underexposed to AI, even if I'm highly, highly, highly exposed to it.
Even if
Um,
you see this vision coming, you're betting against it. You're long CoreWeave, the Nvidias of the world, and you still feel underexposed. So how does
I
everyone
know.
else feel? They're definitely underexposed. They're negative two standard deviations.
Yeah, I mean, so I was trying to decide, okay, within AI, how do you invest? And so I think owning cloud service providers is the best way, because you're at that point are exposed to every possible type of AI use case that develops. So you're not just
Right.
betting on AI, you're not just betting LLMs or image
That's
models or
CoreWeave,
text
Lambda
video.
Lab, and I guess arguably Amazon, Google, Microsoft would
Yeah,
fit in
but
that. But
the
yeah,
hyperscalers are not pure play, so that's why I like a pure play like a CoreWeave, and
right,
there's a number of competitors there, of course. And so
right,
I think that's the best one because you have the most general exposure. So that's like owning the Standard Oil of AI. And then
right.
the model companies, the OpenAIs, the Anthropics, the Mistrals, whatever the new one that Ilya just founded, I felt like they had a significant risk attached to them. And I thought that
Right.
they would be commoditized to a certain degree and not be able to maintain significant moats unless they're able to get a regulatory moat, which is, I think, is why OpenAI spent so much time in
And the
Washington.
hyperscalers are trying to get the regulatory mode too, right?
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
was a little concerned about the investing in
Yeah.
the OpenAIs of the world, because these models seem to be replaced very, very quickly, and progress seems to be happening at an enormously fast rate. And it's every week that I see a new model comes out that outperforms the last one according to the benchmarks.
Right.
This week
Yeah.
it's GPT-4, next week it's Claude, and it keeps happening. And so
Yes.
there seems to be this huge churn. And so I don't think some of these models have that much longevity, as far as I can tell.
I agree.
So, and we see these going off at enormously high valuations, billions and billions of
Yes.
dollars for the seed round. So my play was to do the barbell and to go for the infrastructure level, and then for applications. So for instance, I LP'd into a venture fund, and all they do is applications of AI in all kinds of different spaces. I mean, this fund has a portfolio company that does, marble statues carving with AI. So things you would never even imagine. But,
Right.
the use cases whereby, inputting AI into some existing workflow makes it vastly, vastly better. Like
Frontier use cases.
yeah, like GitHub Copilot is a great example. Obviously, that's an established company, but those sorts of use cases where you're just unlocking a lot of productivity by embedding AI into a use case.
Yeah.
So for me, and those are available at reasonable valuations, like seed,
Right.
conventional seed valuations. I think that is a really interesting way to approach the asset class. That is the way I went ahead and did
I
it.
agree. Look, I think the thesis is spot on, and we are seeing that decay in these new models as another one comes out, and it's a competitive slugfest, and they've got to spend billions of dollars on players like CoreWeave and NVIDIA to maintain it, and they also need to acquire data. Data is one of the edges here, and they also need to invest in distribution. So it's search engine wars all over again. There's one winner that emerged from the rubble. As my friend Michael Preck likes to say, I don't think it'll be a singularity, it'll be a plurality. But picking that winner now is expensive. And the interesting thing about it is, all the FOMO that was around the OpenAI deal. It's like $86 billion valuation. Everyone wanted in, and no one was talking about CoreWeave. I remember when we were talking to our clients, I'm sure you experienced this as an LP, right? You have names that some of your investors don't know. Those are the exciting names. Those ones have the most upside. But then there are names that everyone knows. They're a good logo, but maybe they're not that interesting.
Yeah, it just felt very, very consensus to invest in OpenAI.
Right.
And look, they're now, the main challenges are almost political, like finding political favor in Washington, persuading their most elite executives to stay. And there's this constant churn too on the executive level. Obviously, we see this, Anthropic, I think, came out of OpenAI, and then now you have Ilya leaves OpenAI, starts his own thing. And yeah, so I think it's a political game now, and very,
It's a
very
regulatory
hard.
capture game. That's another way
Yeah.
of saying it, perhaps, right?
Yeah, and hard, I think, to identify the real sustained winners there. So I chose to
Right.
sit that part out.
Right. Makes sense. You go on to say AI will put permanently an end to the post-truth era.
Yeah, this is a kind of a contrarian thing to say, because, of course, everybody thinks that AI is making information on the internet less credible, but I think it's going to make it more credible by forcing us to start to really consider employing, better epistemic tools. It sounds kind of vague.
Another
but
philosophy word, epistemic, by the way, theory of knowledge.
So, since like Photoshop and things like that came out, we've been in this somewhat like uncanny valley era where we kind of think things are real if it seems like it'd be hard or expensive to create it. But like an image on the internet, or video. Now that's been eroding, and most people realize, okay, well, just because this is an image of someone doing something, it doesn't mean it's real. With AI, it became vastly cheaper to create any arbitrary image or video or audio of anyone doing or saying anything. And so, like, there's like, I don't know if you've been on Facebook lately, but there's this like phenomenon where people put like AI content up there, and like the boomers basically are like, oh wow, what an adorable hot dog kitten hybrid or something like that. And it's like obviously fake AI imagery, but they all kind of believe it still. So clearly we haven't like
Really?
recalibrated.
Wow. The boomers don't
Yeah, it's just
understand that it's fake. Huh.
yeah, like, so no one has yet recalibrated their epistemic standards, or at least most people haven't. But AI is going to force us to do this, right? Because you'll be able to create an image of President Trump, like, murdering a cat on the street or something. And of course, like, we know that that's not real, but not everybody's figured that out yet. And then as we continue in this era of uncertainty, my hypothesis is we're going to go completely the opposite way and only believe things that are true via negativa, which is to say that the only things I would believe are true are things which are cryptographically signed at the point of origin. So what I think is going to happen is when you create a selfie on your phone or something like that, there'll be metadata inserted into it, which has your biometric information, the phone's information, the time, the place, and a hash of all of that. And you can embed it on a blockchain, of course. And then you can attest to this content, whether it's image, video, whatever. The same should happen with text, like in media content, like, news articles, whereby the publication attests to the contents of the article, they hash it, they put it on a blockchain,
Right.
and then they can't make stealth edits after the fact, which they love to do.
Makes
So
sense. Yeah.
I think we're going to be forced to enter this more verifiable world because AI is making everything so chaotic and hard to verify. That's a big role I see for blockchains. Actually, that's sort of my preferred blockchain AI nexus, is making things more verifiable because AI has cast us into this episode of doubt.
Right. The cost of manufacturing synthetic images is plummeting, and the response to that is cryptographic proofs. So
totally,
it makes a lot of sense. How do you think about just the parsing of truth, right? So that's another problem, and that I think is actually like the bigger problem. Meaning, people today consume truth based on a lens that they select. The lens might be a news channel. It could be your Twitter feed. It could be the Wall Street Journal. It could be the Washington Post. So, we talk about this, put an end to the post-truth era. I like that idea. It's getting back to the classical ideas that there is truth, beauty, and virtue, as opposed to this postmodern idea of like it's a Jackson Pollock painting. We don't know what north, west, south, and east is. So I like that idea. But do you think that's enough to get back to that world? How does AI help us get there?
Yeah, it's very tricky because we're seeing this institutional collapse in the West. I mean, all of our treasured institutions are no longer credible, like whether it's the government, of course, or I think trust in Congress is at like an all-time low.
Right.
Or academia, they're just stumbling from crisis to crisis. Nobody believes in elite academia.
No one believes
anymore.
in inflation expectations, right?
Right. Like the press itself, like this scandal with Biden's health, like, okay, everybody could see he was in decline, not to get all political or anything like that, but everybody with eyes could see he was experiencing cognitive decline. But the press doesn't start reporting on it seriously until after the debate. I mean, they all had access to the president before the debate. Why didn't they say anything then? So nobody believes in the elite press institutions now, and so we're left with this gulf where, okay, we don't trust the government, we don't trust the press, the fourth estate, we don't trust the experts, the experts misled us around COVID. Again,
Sure.
not to get too political, but they certainly did. So what's left? And we have crowdsourced truth. We have Twitter, you know, and Reddit. But I don't know if that's a very good substitute.
It's
But
like,
yeah,
because the requirement is that people have critical reasoning. That's number one. Number two is that they have time to validate and cross-validate with primary and other kind of sources. And people don't have much time. And convenience is always the killer app. The microwave is great because it makes chicken in 5 minutes, not because it makes the best chicken. And access to information is cheap, easy, and we're flooded with it.
Yeah, and I mean the nature of the modern internet is such that any belief you hold, no matter how bizarre or contrarian, you will be able to find someone to vouch for that. And so anyone doing primary research or whatever, they'll be able to find some content that justifies that position, no matter if it's a flat Earth thing or you know, COVID is caused by 5G towers. So we're no closer to being able to get to the truth. AI models also scare me in that respect because the architects of these models believe that they have a privileged epistemic status, and under the doctrine of AI safety, they basically insert with their own normative views about how the world works into the models.
And they kind of have to. There are decisions that must be made at some point in the training program. If you're programming an LLM, okay, are you going to say, hey, look, here's our model of the universe, right? We believe there are quarks. There's a Higgs boson or not, right? There's at some level, there's got to be, or even the basic interpretation of history, right? There's
I mean, you have to make editorial decisions because people use the models and then they hold the model creators responsible for the content that the models output. Even if the model is trained on all of the information on the internet, it's not socially acceptable to regurgitate that if it's noxious or dangerous or harmful information. The problem is in the quest to eliminate these negative outputs from the models, in my opinion, the model creators go too far and they insert these basically Silicon Valley elite, in most of the case, kind of leftist ideologies into the models. And you end up with models that kind of spout absurdities like
the founders of the United States, the framers, you know, it looked like a Benetton ad or something like that, you know. It's just
like those Google Gemini, right? It's like
Google Gemini, right? I'm an owner of Google, by the way, but so people are inputting their values and kind of non-content into the interpretation layer, and we're going to see more of that.
You know, these models are not valueless. Like, I guess the way we all have opted into the social contract is we have to have some interpretation, some normative direction. But the world is not homogenous. The American Silicon Valley set of values is not what the entire world adheres to. I think it'd be farcical to think that, you know, a few dozen engineers in Silicon Valley could create a stable value set that everybody in the world would align with. This is also the same exact problem we have in social media moderation, by the way.
I agree.
Which is, why do we let a few dozen folks on the Trust and Safety Commission for Twitter, Meta, or Google, or whomever set the tone? At Google, it's the most pernicious because it's Google controls what information exists, basically. Why do we let them determine the terms of service for these systems? So I think the future is more fragmentation, more culturally heterogeneous models. You know, the
that's what Saudi Arabia is going to build out, right? With their version of history and their version of truth and legitimacy.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one legal system that the whole world adheres to. So this is also very bullish for the for basically GPU purchases, by the way, and the cloud providers to bring it back to investing, because every nation state is going to want to build their own cloud because they're not going to trust when we see this is happening.
100%.
They're not going to trust OpenAI or some infrastructure provider to create something that's aligned with their own values, everybody's going to want to, there's going to be a lot of duplication, is what I'm saying.
I agree. I think there's variations on truth, and they're truth setters. I agree with your fragmentation point, although, I believe you're going to see a handful of leaders in each market, right? So Saudi Arabia will have a leader. China probably has one dominant leader. Maybe in the United States, there's Google and Meta duking it out. We'll see what OpenAI does. But in general, people tend to, focus on one or two brands. Here, maybe there's like the Fox News AI, the CNN AI. I could see variations like that emerging. That might be the case. But so maybe there's fragmentation globally across some of these countries and certain niches. But I think within any given market, there's going to be some dominant player. That's generally what we see in media, in industry in general. And
yeah, and you could always have some version of like how Meta works, which is Meta has country specific terms of service. And so they're globally dominant, but then what you see on Turkish Facebook is very different from what you see on American Facebook.
Right. Interesting. A localization.
Yeah. I mean, right. It would be politically fraught if OpenAI is perceived to be, maybe OpenAI fine tunes the model and they're creating the, Chinese chat GPT and the Saudi chat GPT and the Israeli chat GPT and the Indonesian one. They might get in trouble domestically for doing that. But yeah, I mean, you'll have to have some version of that, because you'll get nation states that will ban perceived foreign models because they don't want what's true to be determined by one man.
No, I agree. Like if you go to China and you type in Tiananmen Square, nothing pops up on your screen. That's going to happen with the AI models coming out of Baidu and Tencent.
Yeah, and I think the stakes are extremely high, because if OpenAI were to win and everything, our mode of getting information went from querying Google and being routed to various different websites to, I'm just going to talk to my AI assistant that's plugged into my Apple suite, and everything gets routed back to OpenAI or whomever it is. Now my truth acquisition is completely captive to one company, which is the way it's going. That like,
and we all want it. We all want the personal assistant AI, right? And
it's far better. So I hope that the open source models will maintain or achieve something close to parity with the proprietary ones. And that is an alternative way. That's sort of like the more crypto native way, where maybe there can be crowdsourced, fine tunings or safety interfaces that you can overlay on various open source base models. And you can have a model that's relatively safe and functional and doesn't hallucinate too much, but also not have your, set of knowledge, the things you know about the world, to be controlled by one single entity.
Yeah, look, I think the idea of the public source, public open model, which is truly meta today, and there are a handful of others, there's Hugging Faces out there, but it's an underrated contribution to civilization. Because you're right, you can start there, you can fine tune it, you can tweak it, you have transparency, you know how it's trained, you can measure it against different dimensions, including not just performance statistics around can it do math, but can it do medical diagnostics, but also like value statements, which is what we're going to start seeing next. Like, how would you interpret this statement about the history of Palestine and Jordan, Israel, for example? Like, what's the answer going to be from this model versus another model? No, I agree. Now, you go on to say that this AI boom would rescue the U.S. from demographic malaise and its significant debt overhang. So you're saying AI is like the rescue for the fact that we've got wartime deficits, debt to GDP ratios that are significant.
Yeah, I updated my mental model based on this. I was initially in the doomerist camp of, well, we're just due for a hyperinflation episode because there's only one way out of this. Just if you look at the numbers, I mean, it looks bleak, the picture. I mean, I don't know what debt to GDP is exactly, 125% or something like that. But it's like how it was after World War II. It's crazy. And the amount of interest we're paying on the debt, I think, is now exceeding the military budget or close to it. I mean, it's terrifying. And, typically in history, when this happens, there's only a few ways out. One is significant austerity, which there's no desire politically to do that. No political will at all.
Right.
I mean, the Republicans are even more skeptical of Medicare entitlements, but they would never dream of talking about reforming.
Oh, you're right. And that's what needs to be addressed, but
of course, that's probably it. That's probably the main thing. Or cutting defense spending. We can never agree to do that. And the other way out is a default, which we don't do in the US here. And so that would be unacceptable. I think we need to be considered creditworthy internationally. And then the last one is inflation. Or, of course, you could have significant GDP growth, but it looks difficult with the demographic trends, with birth rates generally coming down. And, of course, immigration is sometimes perceived as a way to fix that, but things in this country seem to be trending against more immigration. And I think some of those experiments haven't worked. So I have obviously a structurally inflationary outlook, but the spoiler of all that is I think AI is this second industrial revolution. I think it vastly enhances human productivity. If you've used a lot of these AI tools, you notice that your ability to perform a certain task gets easier by a factor of not just 10, but of a factor of 100 to 1,000 in some cases. I personally use AI for tasks like data analysis. I drop a CSV file in chat GPT advanced data analysis and have it drop charts for me and manipulate the data and the variables. And that's just one extremely niche task. But when you get into these higher value added professions and AI is suddenly competing with them, you're unleashing a wave of productivity, which will cause a total realignment of the labor force in this country. But I think it does tack on a couple points of GDP growth for the indefinite future.
For the owners of capital, the owners of AI, or those that can enhance their productivity by being an early adopter.
Yeah, it's not a happy story. I think it's happy in the sense that it might help us avoid default or a significant inflationary episode, but it's not happy in the sense that it increases divisions in society between the owners of capital and labor and really depresses the value of labor and depresses the value of membership in one of these guilds like the medical field or the legal field.
Yeah, it's a guild buster for sure. I'm a little bit more optimistic on the impact for labor. You're still going to need a plumber to come by and fix up the water leak that I got in my bathroom, and AI is not going to do that. And that person's opportunity cost of time just went up, so that blue collar worker is going to get paid more. But you're right, it's going to be disruptive. How do you see the time frame? Earlier you said over the next 10 years. I think that's right. The question is, are we in a fast takeoff or in a slow takeoff for transformation and adoption?
I think this is the most important question in capital markets right now, actually, is the speed in which we're able to embed AI use cases into ordinary business operations for real companies. And we have seen a disillusionment. I'm sure you follow this in the last few months. Like Sequoia wrote an interesting piece where they said, okay, well, here's the CapEx. There's the amount that's being spent building AI infrastructure. And here's the revenue, all the revenue attributable to AI. And the numbers don't match up at all.
NVIDIA and friends will consolidate one area.
Yeah. And I mean, NVIDIA's revenue is a function of partly speculative attempts by venture capitalists to fund businesses that are building on AI, because
it's like the AWS spend from the 2010s, all the startup. Yeah.
So NVIDIA's revenue is real, but in some sense is also funded by this land grab and this desire of newly funded startups. And so basically capital allocators' belief that AI will be big. So the end startups that are buying GPUs or buying compute, they may not have the revenue to justify it. So eventually someone does need to make money from AI. And what we've seen in the corporate world is penetration isn't that high right now. I mean, you're seeing AI used for marketing, copy. You haven't seen it really penetrate core business operations. Obviously, it depends on the sector. So that is my concern, actually. But at the same time, as a user of these tools, I'm so compelled by them that I'm absolutely certain that they will be transformative. But yeah, I'm currently in the slow takeoff camp. So
Yeah, I'm there as well.
Yeah. So I think some of the belly aching is warranted actually in terms of
Yeah.
wondering about whether the capex is justified.
Right. I mean, like the AI impact is push, not pull. Meaning, like, I've got to encourage my team, like, hey, are you guys looking at the latest tools or not? Versus pull is when Gmail came out or the web browser came out. You don't even have to have any education. It's like one sentence. And we don't, the GPT had a novelty experience, and some people continue to use it. I use it, and others use it in different kinds of ways, in a general purpose way, but not with a level of specialization you need to disrupt an industry or profession, or as you said, the guilds.
Yeah. I mean, it's just going to take a lot of time to figure out how to do AI diagnostics or draft contracts with AI. And I mean, a lot of it is also under the surface. Like, I think Meta is a good example of a company that is incorporating AI into maybe every aspect of the platform. We don't necessarily perceive it that directly as an end user, but it's there. And merely by using Meta, we are using AI, or actually probably this service that we're using to stream right now is most likely using AI to smooth out the dimples on our faces and things like that. So it is kind of a B2B to C story in many ways. And so I think some of the pessimism is unwarranted because people don't see that. They think just the consumer use of AI, literally querying Chat GPT and asking it questions. But I think it is being integrated behind the scenes.
Right. Well, I know you and I are NVIDIA bulls and have been for a while, but I think this is another reason why I actually like the Meta Google story in an underappreciated way, which is that I think big tech companies will be amongst the first to transform their business and execution around AI. They're going to eat their cooking first, right? So, I mean, you're going to see Meta and Google spin up divisions, spin up business units and workflows, and an orchestration of agents against an objective faster than any startup can. And that's going to create more concentration, which is a different set of issues, right? We want to push technology and compute out to the margins and to the edges where it has more marginal impact. But they have a significant advantage.
Yeah, and I mean, listen to Mark Zuckerberg on the Doorcash podcast, for instance. He's laser focused on AI. His concern is getting enough nuclear power plants built so that Meta can get the compute to power the AI that they need. So I think his prioritization, he has AI absolute top priority. So I think that's very telling. Totally agree. I think it is actually the big tech companies that more immediately unlock the benefits.
Winners keep winning. It's just another example. They're in the pole position and they have the capability. They can fund it. They've also got the data. They got the distribution. They're influencing Washington. So that's the edge that they have. And to your point on the Door Crush podcast that Mark had, I think it was like 2 months ago or so, is quite revealing. There's discussion of Amazon building a data center that'll require 960 megawatts of power, which is the output of a nuclear reactor. I mean, nuclear reactor can power a region of New York State.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And it is something I actually, it kind of makes me laugh. People used to complain about Bitcoin's power demands. And
everyone flipped on that whole thing.
They don't anymore. And actually, the main people that were the antagonists of Bitcoin energy usage have now flipped to being anti-AI people, which is it really tickles me. But it's true. AI will outstrip Bitcoin's influence on the grid within a couple of years, certainly by 2030 is my estimate. I don't think Bitcoin is much more than 1%. I think you'll see AI will be probably data centers themselves will be at least 10% of US electricity consumption by 2030. And I think AI will be at least a fifth of that, if not faster. I mean, there was an I think OpenAI economist that wrote this series, which I'm forgetting his name now, talking about $1 trillion data centers, the $1 trillion cluster. So that you have also really outrageous projections too. But even if AI just continues at this current rate, it will outstrip Bitcoin as a buyer of energy, and it will be a political issue. And the challenge is, of course, that AI is not as able to, or general data centers are not as able to be like benign buyers of power on the grid the way the Bitcoin miners are. You can't turn off an AI data center at a moment's notice if it gets really hot in Texas and there's a grid scarcity event. You have to keep training the model or doing inference. And AI data centers have to be in specific places for latency reasons.
Right.
You don't want 400 milliseconds of ping on your AI query. You want instantaneous. So AI is less equipped to deal with the political, demands of the decels that Bitcoin miners were able to eventually deal with. So that is going to become a really interesting conflict in years to come.
I agree. Energy resources and, kind of following the value chain, or I call it follow the money, going down to the utility layer and how to power all the utilities and the provisioning of that. Of course, we saw CoreWeave apparently may have made a bid for like Core Scientific. So those worlds are interacting. They're trying to find, the Bitcoin mining capability, because they figured out how to provision low cost power as efficiently as possible. So yeah, these two worlds are interacting. Well, why don't this last topic we can conclude there is digital assets. Where do you see where we are in the cycle today?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a summer of malaise. It's a tough summer for crypto. The meme coin frenzy, I think, was telling because we kind of speed ran the bull markets of years past, and we went right to the most nihilistic element, which is meme coins. There's no one really believes that there's long-term value in meme coins, except for a few crazy people on crypto Twitter. And everybody ended up in that meta, and that made me very concerned because it signaled to me that everyone was trying to front run retail, and then the retail meme coin bid didn't materialize, and it was all very nihilistic and cynical. And I think summertime is a tough time in capital markets anyway. It's funny because the real fundamental progress being made in crypto is really, really significant in terms of making it more usable, better wallet technology, integrating crypto into serious business processes, especially stable coins.
Right. Well, there's a use case right there. I know you've been focused on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and just making crypto more integrated into existing financial infrastructure, especially outside the US. Of course, in the US, the banks don't really want to deal with crypto for a number of reasons, but and scalability, like these problems are almost becoming solved. But at the same time, the valuations are going down. So I think there's some, very specific exogenous factors. Like for Bitcoin, you have the distribution of the Mt. Gox coins.
Right.
You have Germany selling off 43,000 Bitcoins or something. Apparently, market selling.
Right. Market sell, hit bid, sell.
So there's some factors like that, but I think crypto is just not the main theme that investors care about right now, and there is some level of exhaustion in the markets. But as far as my specific purview is like startups that are utilizing crypto, real applications, real end users, things are really great actually, and venture financing has recovered.
Well, you have a venture seed, so you're seeing the end user application development, which is what you need to see in digital assets. Stablecoins is an incredible use case, but it still hasn't gone down to the end user level. I agree. Do you see any competition from NVIDIA versus Bitcoin, like as in terms of asset class interest, and in the sense that there's like a hard money story around Bitcoin. There's also a speculative story around crypto. There's like a get rich quick as fast as I can and find the fastest momentum asset. And is NVIDIA competing in any way, in a material way that influences the performance of this asset class?
Yeah, totally. I think modern day public capital markets are all about attention, and NVIDIA sucked attention out of all public assets. I mean,
I agree. Yeah,
we see this crazy top heaviness in the S&P 500, and then also I think it also sucked some of the attention away from crypto, which is that's fine. That happens. The NVIDIA might be challenged here. I mean, the law of large numbers has to kick in at some point. I don't know how much larger they could possibly grow. Maybe they could continue to surprise. But yeah, certainly I think investors are
Right.
just not as focused on digital assets right now, and that's fine. I think the fundamentals are still compelling, especially as we continue to lurch towards what I think will be a real wave of sovereign debt crises, and so we'll
Or the
continue to
structural
care about
inflation
Bitcoin.
pressures, right? That
Yeah,
you
so
referenced. Right.
those aren't going away. You know, rates matter. That'll be a factor here towards the back half of the year. But yeah, undoubtedly, Nvidia has sucked some of the attention away from crypto.
Great. Well, we covered a lot of ground. How can folks, follow? I know, you're very well known on Twitter. Any other channels that people can follow you on, or?
Yeah, come to my fight in Nashville, July 25. There'll be fireworks. Twitter is best place to reach me. Nic__Carter. That's 2 underscores. And then for an archive of all my content, that's niccarter.info.
Also, I would say give a listen to Castle Island podcast with Nick and Matt. It's a very good podcast. I think you will enjoy it as well. And you should get a Polymarket bet going on, Nick, with your fight. I want to see what's going on there.
I will. Everyone that bet on me last time lost money because the fight resolved to like no bet or something.
Oh, is that right?
Fight, which is unfortunate. But
so you're going to be underpriced in the next one then. People are going to fear.
I don't know. I think I'm the favorite. We'll see. We'll see what lines open.
All right. This was great. Thank you so much, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ram.
Have a good one.